Welcome to the Golden Gems podcast. Today we're taking a deep dive into Thomas Drake, the NSA whistleblower who exposed billions in waste and got charged with espionage for doing exactly what the system told him to do.
Right. And imagine for a second facing 35 years in a federal penitentiary. Your career is ruined. Your life savings are completely wiped out.
Yeah.
And your crime is literally preserving the exact documents the government ordered you to keep.
It's just staggering. We are going to forensically deconstruct the anatomy of that institutional retaliation today. Because this isn't, a Hollywood thriller where a plucky insider drops a file on a desk and the truth immediately sets everyone free.
Right. That's in the movie version.
Exactly. We are taking a meticulous look at how the bureaucratic machinery actually dismantles people who attempt to fix it from the inside.
And to really understand that machinery, we have to look at the man who tested it. I mean, Thomas Drake was not an outsider.
No.
He wasn't some radical trying to tear down the system. He was the ultimate insider. His worldview was entirely forged during the Cold War.
Right. He grew up watching the U.S. and the Soviet Union locked in this massive nuclear standoff.
Exactly. So to a young Thomas Drake, intelligence work wasn't just statecraft or politics. It was the literal existential difference between survival and annihilation.
Yeah, and he viewed signals intelligence through that very specific lens, which we should probably define for anyone unfamiliar because it's crucial to this deep dive.
Sure.
When we say signals intelligence, or SIGINT, we mean the interception of electronic data.
Right. So everything from radar waves to radio broadcasts and eventually emails.
Exactly. Drake starts his career in 1979 in the Air Force as an electronic warfare specialist doing exactly that. He is intercepting, decrypting, and analyzing enemy communications.
And in that environment, one missed signal basically equals a military catastrophe. So he builds this foundation of just obsessive technical precision.
And that precision carries him straight up the ladder.
Yeah.
He moves into civilian defense contracting, and by 2001, he is a senior executive at NSA headquarters at Fort Meade.
Right at the absolute pinnacle of the intelligence community. He had the highest level of access.
But then September 11th happens.
Yeah.
Drake is actually at Fort Meade when the planes hit. And I mean, the scale of this intelligence failure really cannot be overstated.
It was catastrophic. The United States had a $30 billion per year intelligence apparatus.
$30 billion?
Yeah, and yet 19 hijackers operated inside the country for months. They communicated, they trained, and they planned completely undetected.
And the trauma of that morning fundamentally rewired the psychology of the NSA overnight, didn't it?
Oh, entirely. The institutional pivot was violent. Fear just completely replaced oversight. The strict legal constraints the NSA had operated under for decades were essentially obliterated.
It's almost like a highly trained surgeon suddenly discarded their scalpel and just picked up a sledgehammer.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
The precision of targeted, legally authorized intelligence was instantly replaced by the blunt force of mass surveillance, justified entirely by panic.
And the environment inside the agency became incredibly toxic. Because in that immediate aftermath, any questioning of these new mass surveillance programs, it was no longer viewed as quality control.
Right.
It wasn't seen as budget oversight or even a debate about the Constitution. It was viewed as a lack of patriotism.
Wow.
If you weren't fully on board with sweeping up every single piece of data on Earth, well, you were seen as soft on terrorism.
So the mandate was basically collect everything, everywhere, all at once.
Exactly.
But that post-9/11 panic didn't just manifest as abstract policy, right? It erased the rule book, but it also opened the national checkbook.
Very much so.
It materialized into some disastrous financial and technological decisions that Drake had a front row seat for. Which brings us to the tale of two competing programs. ThinThread versus Trailblazer.
Right, so the NSA wasn't just looking for a needle in a haystack anymore. They were having thousands of new haystacks dumped on them every single second.
Just drowning in emails and internet traffic?
Yeah. Exactly. They needed a magnet, not a pitchfork. And internally, a small team of NSA engineers, led by this brilliant mathematician, Bill Bennett, had actually developed a program called ThinThread to be that exact magnet.
And ThinThread was brilliant because it basically separated the envelope from the letter.
Yes.
It allowed the NSA to see who was talking to who, the metadata, but it cryptographically locked the actual content of domestic emails until a judge gave them the key.
Precisely. It had constitutional protections built directly into its code. It automatically encrypted all domestic communications until you could establish probable cause.
Which proves you could have deep effective signals intelligence without violating the Fourth Amendment.
And it was cheap, it was built in-house, and it actually worked.
So, I mean, you look at ThinThread, you see that it works. How does NSA leadership then actively decide to kill it? Is it just pure incompetence that they went with Trailblazer instead?
Well, it wasn't incompetence so much as a completely different set of priorities.
Yeah.
ThinThread's built-in privacy protections,
Yeah.
the exact things that made it legally sound, were precisely what made it unappealing to a post-9/11 leadership.
Ah, they didn't want the restrictions.
Right. They wanted unfettered access. They didn't want a system that locked them out until they had a warrant. So they sidelined ThinThread and went with Trailblazer, which was this massive outsourced contract to a private company called SAIC.
Science Applications International Corporation.
Exactly. And Trailblazers had no built-in privacy protections whatsoever.
And no cost controls either. The initial budget for Trailblazer is $280 million. Drake sits there and watches that budget explode to $500 million, then $800 million, and eventually over $1.2 billion by 2005.
Right.
And for all that money, it produces zero operational capability. It simply did not work.
Well, the structural mechanics of defense contracting explain a lot of that. The government frequently uses what are called cost-plus contracts.
Right, where the contractor bids artificially low to win the job.
Exactly. And then, as costs inevitably overrun, the government covers those costs, plus a guaranteed percentage of profit.
So the longer the project takes and the more it fails, the more money the contractor actually makes. It's a perverse incentive to just fail slowly.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why I think we really have to consider the distinction between incompetence and systemic corruption here. Because you'll read standard narratives calling Trailblazer an example of government waste.
Sure.
But calling it waste is far too generous. It functioned exactly as intended for the contractors profiting from it. SAIC's board included former NSA officials. The revolving door was wide open.
Right.
Trailblazer wasn't an intelligence tool. It was a wealth transfer mechanism. Billions of taxpayer dollars flowing to a private company for a broken system, while the working legal alternative was deliberately suppressed.
That revolving door is really the key to the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
Because the technical architecture reflects the institutional values. A massive, outsourced, bloated project benefits the bureaucratic ecosystem far more than a cheap, efficient, internally developed tool ever could.
So if you're listening to this, you're probably asking yourself, why didn't Drake just walk away? Why stay in an agency that is actively suppressing functional intelligence tools during a global crisis?
It goes right back to his Cold War mentality. He believed in the mission of the NSA deeply. He believed that bad technology and corrupt contracting were actively endangering the country.
Right.
So he decides to act. But he doesn't just go to the New York Times and dump a hard drive. He chooses to follow every single rule the system prescribes for whistleblowers.
Every single one. In 2002, he briefs the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. He gives them the technical breakdown of Trailblazer's failures.
And the congressional staffers are alarmed by this.
Extremely alarmed, which triggers an investigation. Then, in 2003, the Pentagon's Defense Department Inspector General, the DoD IG, launches an audit into the NSA's contracting practices.
Now, the Inspector General's office is supposed to be the internal watchdog. It exists precisely to provide independent oversight and protect employees who expose fraud. Drake meets with the DoD IG investigators for over a year. They actually set up a temporary office inside NSA headquarters. He brings them emails, internal reports, technical documents detailing this billion-dollar failure.
And he is strictly preserving those internal documents because the IG specifically requested them for their investigation. But then the audit is released in 2004.
Yeah.
And while it completely confirms the billions over budget and the technical dysfunction, it does something incredibly dangerous. The report vaguely cites anonymous NSA sources and describes their fears of retaliation.
Which is basically painting a massive neon target right on Drake's back.
Yeah.
Anyone in NSA leadership reading that report knows exactly who those sources are.
Exactly. And the retaliation against Drake is immediate. In 2005, he writes a letter directly to NSA Director Keith Alexander about the malfeasance. Alexander simply forwards the letter right back to the senior managers implicated in the corruption.
Unbelievable.
By 2006, Drake is stripped of all meaningful duties. They give him this completely phantom title, Distributed Workforce Advocate.
Yeah, he has no access, no authority. His career is just effectively terminated.
And I think there is a massive insight here about the nature of bureaucracy. We are told that internal oversight bodies like the IG exist to protect the employee and correct the institution.
Right.
But functionally, institutions do not have morals. They have immune systems. Whistleblower channels often function as the white blood cells of the bureaucracy. They are designed to identify internal threats to the budget and isolate them.
That is exactly what happened here. The official channels didn't reform the NSA. They identified Thomas Drake so the institution could neutralize him.
So, frozen out of his job and completely ignored by the IG, Drake utilizes his last legal option. He goes to the press. In 2006, he contacts a reporter at the Baltimore Sun. But, I mean, how does a local reporter understand NSA code?
Well, Drake meticulously provides only unclassified and publicly available information. He strictly focuses on the financial waste of Trailblazer and the management failures.
Right, he deliberately separates classified from unclassified material.
Exactly. He is blowing the whistle on a financial crime. He's not revealing state secrets.
But the timing is just disastrous. Right around the time his Baltimore Sun contacts are happening, the New York Times breaks a massive story about the Bush administration's warrantless wiretapping program.
Yeah.
This was a highly classified domestic surveillance dragnet, and Drake was not the source for that New York Times story.
He had absolutely nothing to do with it. But the FBI doesn't care. The White House is furious about the New York Times piece, and they launched this massive leak investigation called Operation Fog Cutter to find anyone talking to the media.
Which brings us to November 2007, dawn. 20 FBI agents surround Drake's home in Maryland with guns drawn. They raid his house and seize computers, personal documents, and boxes of files.
What are those files?
They are the exact NSA records the Pentagon Inspector General told him to preserve.
Yeah.
The very documents he kept for the official watchdog become the supposed evidence of his crime.
And the FBI just applies immense pressure for years. They want him to confess to leaking classified information to the New York Times. He refuses, obviously, because he hadn't done it.
Right.
So finally, in April 2010, a federal grand jury hands down a 10-count indictment. Drake is facing 35 years in federal prison, with 5 of those counts coming under the Espionage Act of 1917.
And we really have to look at the historical bastardization of the Espionage Act here, because this was a law passed during World War I designed specifically to prosecute wartime spies who are actively handing military secrets to foreign adversaries.
Right, handing troop movements to the Kaiser, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And here we see it weaponized to prosecute a peacetime loyal employee who exposed unclassified financial waste to a local newspaper.
You really have to view the indictment through the lens of psychological warfare, because the government's goal wasn't necessarily to win at a trial based on the evidence.
Right.
The goal was to destroy Thomas Drake financially, professionally, and socially before he ever saw a jury. They suspend his clearance immediately. The legal fees bankrupt him. The media parrots the government's claim that he's a spy.
Former colleagues just completely avoid him.
Yeah. It is a textbook strategy of institutional crush.
Right.
The process itself is the punishment.
But the institutional machinery eventually starts to short-circuit because the government actually has to present real evidence in a courtroom. Drake's defense attorneys, Jesselyn Raddack and James Whita, start dismantling the case.
Right.
They demand the DOD IG records. They say, show us the files proving Drake was an authorized whistleblower cooperating with your own investigation.
And the Inspector General's office responds that those records were routinely destroyed.
I mean, that detail is staggering. McClatchy later reported on this in 2015. The records were destroyed while Drake was under active federal investigation. It is the equivalent of an arsonist casually mentioning to the police that they burned down the fire station because it was taking up too much space. It is a highly convenient destruction of the exact evidence that exonerates him.
And because of that, as the June 2011 trial date approaches, the prosecution's case just completely collapses. They realize they cannot prove Espionage Act charges, and the destroyed IG evidence looks incredibly corrupt.
Yeah.
So days before the trial, the government offers a plea deal. They drop all the espionage charges. Drake pleads guilty to a single misdemeanor exceeding authorized use of a government computer. No prison time.
The judge in this case, Judge Richard Bennett, delivers this scorching rebuke from the bench. He publicly excoriates the DOJ, calling their actions unconscionable.
Which is incredibly rare. You almost never see a federal judge publicly berate the Justice Department in a national security case.
Right. Yet, despite this massive legal vindication, Drake's security clearance was permanently revoked. His career was over.
And that leads to the ultimate legacy of the Drake case. Even though he didn't spend decades in a cell, the government succeeded in its broader mission.
They sent a terrifying message to anyone else watching.
Exactly. Look at the fallout. In 2012, Drake tries to return to government service, which triggers a requirement for the DoD IG to finally issue a formal report on his retaliation claims.
Right, and that report doesn't come out until 2015, and it concludes there was no evidence of retaliation.
Because the mechanics of how they reach that conclusion are devious. The Inspector General intentionally limited the scope of their investigation to only the years 2007 to 2008.
The period when he was already under criminal investigation by the FBI.
Right. They completely ignored the actual retaliation period of 2002 to 2006, when he was stripped of his duties and isolated. His attorney called it a pathetic, anemic excuse.
Meanwhile, Trailblazer, the $1.2 billion disaster Drake tried to stop, was quietly canceled in 2006. Zero operational capability. Zero accountability. SAIC just kept receiving massive government contracts.
And the executive branch used Drake as a template. The Obama administration watched the Drake prosecution and then proceeded to charge 8 people under the Espionage Act.
Reality winner, Chelsea Manning, Daniel Hale, they all faced massive sentences under that exact same 1917 statute.
Right. And then there's the Edward Snowden connection. Snowden watched exactly what happened to Thomas Drake.
He saw an insider follow every single rule, assist with the internal audits, and end up raided by armed agents at dawn.
Exactly. Snowden directly cited Drake's ordeal as the reason he bypassed official channels entirely in 2013. He saw that internal reporting was a trap, so he went straight to journalists and fled to Russia.
Wow.
By punishing Thomas Drake, the government basically precipitated a complete collapse of trust in the oversight mechanisms of the classified world. We even learned later that the Pentagon IG office was experiencing its own internal whistleblowing crisis.
Because the watchdog itself was completely compromised.
Straight.
It's this ultimate philosophical dilemma for you, the listener. Because if following the rules guarantees your destruction, the system effectively forces ethical people into a horrific choice.
Right.
You either remain complicit with the corruption, you spend decades in federal prison, or you accept exile from your own country.
And when the legal avenues for oversight are specifically designed to neutralize the person reporting the abuse, the institution has successfully insulated itself from any meaningful reform.
Exactly. Which leaves us with a lingering question to mull over. In a democracy, when the legal channels for reporting government misconduct are intentionally designed as a trap, does the act of leaking classified material directly to the public stop being a crime and start becoming a civic duty?
It's a profound question.
Thank you for listening to the Golden Gems podcast. We'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep listening, and keep celebrating the power of uncompromising voices.